when you create an occult order, you started to create a group mind. There is a little pool of consciousness that is very focused, very clear. It may not be purely represented in any one or any number of actual members of it, but collectively they create something that is more than the sum of their own parts. And this does something in some way that I find almost embarrassing to talk about, to stabilize the society at large. It ties in, I suppose, I'm going back to Genesis here with the whole myth of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham starts this negotiation with God about, will you not destroy those cities if there's X number of people who are good men? Let's say 50 to start with. And he goes through this whole sort of auction with God and gets it down to 10 good men are in these cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So God finally makes the deal, obviously knowing the score, and says, okay, if you can find 10 good men in the city, I won't destroy it. The upshot is that they can't find 10 good men in the city, so God gets to destroy everything and has his day of fun. But from that arose a Jewish legend that I think has some substance, in that there are a certain amount of tzaddikim, righteous ones, illuminated ones, who preserve our society, who preserve human civilization, for want of a better word, simply by being what they are and being connected to what they are. They haven't stopped being human. One of the big things about any kind of spiritual training is that if you do it long enough, you finally become free of all these frustrating personality traits. You get rid of every last anxiety, every last bit of obsessive behavior you're prone to. And you just become this pure being. You walk in the room, you smile, and everybody is having these body orgasms of illumination. It isn't like that. You still keep the human side however far you go. If you ever really chat with somebody who's really alert, awakened, and has a lot to say about deep consciousness, they'll still admit, they just get times when some childhood trauma that damaged them is still affecting their thoughts. It's still there. Arthur and I were having a discussion this afternoon in the car about this, about things that have just persisted. I was giving examples from my own life of a certain despair that cuts in at certain times. It's mitigated, it's certainly controlled, and it's certainly reduced, but it's still there. It's just part of my psyche, it's part of the structure, it's part of the life I've lived to this point. And to have any profound or meaningful illumination, are you waving your hand? Or just sitting like that? No, sorry. No. Sarah. I thought you were going to try to wait for a question.
Chicken hand.
It's okay. Oh, yeah. Full illumination is going to include an awareness of all of these things as being part of our nature. It's not that we believe that there's a marvelous one thing and a really horrible other thing there. There's only a totality. There's true will, there's truth of self we're working towards, includes and encompasses all aspects of our own being. What we gain along the way is consciousness and a growing peace with these different things that are going on with us. That kind of brings me to this happiness thing, which was a really dumb thing to choose with, a theme. We've got 7,000 words or more in the Book of the Law. There's joy, there's ecstasy and delight and stuff, pleasure, but no happiness. There is no happy in the Book of the Law. It's not used once. You can do the search and it just says, yeah, no results found, 0. There's no happy. Now, partly that's because it's trying to lay out the absolute fundamental aspects of what existence is and what we are as individual beings. And happiness is a rather human thing to have. It's one aspect of being still your mundane self. The thing is that, yeah, if you got into all of this, you wanted to have superpowers or you wanted to have mystical ecstasy, or you wanted to have visions of the Godhead, whatever it is, this knowledge and conversation, this complete entrainment with the experience of Godhead. But as a human being going through a life on this planet with thunderstorms and power outages and hot days and lousy buses and heavy traffic and subway breakdowns and all of the rest, you're actually after happiness. If you've got that, you're going to be able to find your way through. I wasn't sure how to get into this. I rewrote this thing about 5 times over the last 2 weeks. And every time I thought, I think I've almost got it. But the truth is, I can't define happiness. I went on to Wiktionary and I went through various philosophical quotes from various people who said things about what makes you happy. Nobody came up with anything other than, well, it's sort of how you feel after a release of endorphins. You just feel good. But I had a concrete example yesterday. I live in central Mexico. So when I come here, I have to take a plane, usually to Miami, Houston, or maybe Atlanta. It's almost Houston. And there was weather there that was kind of like here tonight. The weather's bad, and we have to go circling around, and the pilot is making all these reassuring comments in a southern drawl. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to miss my connection, and everything is going to fall apart. I've always been a panicker. I've always been a worrier. I was maybe not born that way, but as far back as I can remember, anxiety was a part of my existence, the same way that I have bones in my fingers and nails on the end of them. Anxiety was just something there. And suddenly there was just this, it's an embarrassing word, happiness, that came in and said, well, nothing you can do. This was not profound. This was not one of these, quotes that you're going to pin on the cubicle of your office. Nothing you can do. But it was the sense that I connected with that. And I was fairly used to connecting with that pretty rapidly in the middle of some kind of minor crisis. That made me think, well, you have come a long way. That was about 130 seconds worth of anxiety, as opposed to 2.5 hours until you finally actually do make a connection to get your plane to Toronto. All of this stuff I'd been doing over the years had simply begun to create another level of connection inside. I came across one quote from Crowley, which comes from the heart of the Master. If you know this piece, he wrote this in 1925. The Abbey of Cefalù had collapsed, he'd been kicked out of Italy. He's broke, he's not getting anywhere. There's a dozen or so followers around the world, but the prophet of the Aeon is just not making it all happen. And this is where he went into a crisis and came out with a text, which I can probably find if I just take long enough to look at the page. Yeah, 1925, it was close to 50. This was 2 decades after he'd attained the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. This was well over a decade after he'd finally completed the crossing of the abyss that separates mundane personality consciousness from supernal consciousness. It's poetically phrased, but here he is being absolutely genuine about how he felt. Alas for me, who am too much alive with the horrible and hopeless ache for sleep of one half drugged. Dazed, stupefied, I know not who I am. I know not whence I came, I know not whither I go. Vaguely I say within my dull heart, I must not sleep, for I am a soldier. But of what captain? In what war? I cannot guess. He just lost any sense of where he was at that moment. And the whole text is his moving through this condition again, back to confidence in what he's doing. I won't say it's a happy text, it was obviously wrenchingly done, but The older Crowley, from the stories you read, he was happy. I always think it's a shame that he wrote his confessions in the mid-1920s, because The Heart of the Master was something he produced where he finally admitted to himself that he was the prophet of the Aeon. This was his job. His true will was to spread the word of Thelema by any and all means possible and appropriate. He went on from there, and there was an inner equilibrium that he found in a lot of what he produced. He'd done most of his critical writing, but we still got the Book of Thoth. In the mid-30s, he gave those lectures, the 8 lectures on yoga in London, which I still think are the absolute best introduction to Thelema that any newcomer can pick up. It's just him, after dinner, making quips, kidding around with a small audience, probably about the size of this one. They were preserved in typescript and eventually published. But he just makes his whole essence of his philosophy so clear in those 8 lectures. You sit down, you read them in 2 or 3 evenings, and that's making sure you've absorbed everything as you go through. And it's a marvelous introduction. It's something that you read. I used to read it when I was living in Canada in January or February, because it was dark and miserable and cold. And I'd just read this thing, and I couldn't help, after 2 or 3 pages, a couple of his lame jokes and some of his funnier ones, just getting the lift of this thing. He was enjoying what he was doing. This was not his holy duty. He was not struggling with it. He wasn't resisting. He wasn't, that whole line just now about a soldier in what war, I don't know. He was just rolling with it. What makes happiness? Everyone has to find their own version of that, the same way everybody has to find their own true will, their own essential self. You get a lot of clues when you start looking at who you are, and above all, what you've done. If you want to know who you are, look at where you fucked up. That was you at the limit. That was you at the point where you weren't sure of what was going to happen, and you screwed up. But you wanted to accomplish what you were trying to do, or alternatively, somebody had told you had to do something that you didn't want to do, so you fucked it up. You could say, well, this doesn't work, and then you're okay, you're off the hook. Either way, you've got big clues to who you are by looking at the mess you've made of your own life. So if you look back and think, well, my life's been a catastrophe, you're very close to full gnosis. It's wonderful. It's all there laid out. That's why we stress this business of keeping diaries. Write down the fuck-ups. Write down the stupid things. Write down the time when you're so angry that all of this magical or meditational work you've done has no impact whatsoever. You're still pissed off! And you need to put that down and record it. That's the reality of the moment. Your truth is right there. Going through a system that helps you examine that somewhat forensically is extremely helpful. Secondly, doing this in company with other people beats doing it on your own. I think we've probably all tried doing it on our own. I'll just sit there, I've got the books, and I'll figure out what I'm going to do, and I'll say those powerful words as well as the names of power and anything else that's got power in it, and try and break through, and you just end up banging your head against a wall because you are too afraid to look beyond what you know. You may simply be incapable of allowing yourself or leading yourself beyond what you know. You're stuck where you're at.